The Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. Second Book. The Letter of BELICENA VILLCA. 28th Day. Rusbal, the boulder of Saturn, is located at 5 kilometers from Onaba, the actual city of Huelva, over an elevation of 37 meters, which dominate the Comacote Pelos. It means, on the left shore of the confluence of the rivers Tinta and Odile. In the age when the Phoenicians conquered Onaba, they edified the temple of Rusbal, specially to satisfy the request of the Hebrew merchants. They were who transported the ships towards these far ports. Were the days of Solomon, when the riches of Israel could rend the Phoenician fleet. And all the drinking vessels of King Solomon were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon. For the king had a sea and navy of Tharsis, with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tharsis, bringing gold, and silver, ivory, apes and peacocks. Kings 10:21. As can be read in other chapters of the Book of the Kings, Solomon, who effectively possessed the Ekma, discovered that Eve was also manifested under other aspects, generally identifiable with foreign gods, and he worshipped them, or allowed the priests to do it, and to raise altars and temples. With the navies of Tharsis, they traveled, due to the priests, who ordered the construction of the temple of Rusbal, in the far Tartessos. 200 years after Solomon, and 500 before the fall of Tharsis, in hands of Carthage, colony of Tyre, Isra, who also possessed the Ekma, and knew the plan of the Galeen, he could prophesy, with mathematical precision, its end. Howl, ye ships of Tharsis! For your port is devastated. Who hath taken this counsel? Eve-Sebarat hath purposed it, to stain the pride, to debase the glory of all the lords of that country. Isaiah 23:1. But in days of Solomon, the most important colony, a part of Tyre, was Zidon, to whose port reached and departure the navies of Tharsis. Well, Zidon is not a Phoenician name, but Greek, country with which the Punic men were allied against the Midans, or Persians. What means that name? What is its origin? Well, neither more or less than the great tree of the pomegranate, due to pomegranate, in Greek, is side. About the origin, the Greeks gave it such name because in Hebrew cult was practiced there under King Solomon's auspices. This is the cult to the divine mother of Egypt, side, the great wise pomegranate. Raman Bina, in Hebrew. Side, as Ekera was wife of the King Solomon in the Greek myths. The Hebrew priests also transported the cult of the Great Mother, Raman Bina, to the Phoenician colonies and gave name, amongst others, to the actual Andalusian city of Granada. The Phoenicians, in fact, founded a fortified factory, which they called Raman, in honor to the cult practiced by their main customers. However, the Iberian native populations, who were Pelasgians, as the Trescans, denominated the fruit with the voice grana, which has the same root that the Roman Trescan, malum granugem, that's to say, fruit of many grains. To that citadel of Semite merchants, Raman was locally called Granada, Granad, and Granada. In reality, the chosen site by the Phoenicians to install their factory was across rows of Iberian parts, already occupied by the own Iberians and Greeks, as would be then by the Toagili, Tartessians, and the Celts. But, being the main objective the commerce, it is understood that each population fortified their own urban base, and appeared, in this manner, many citadels, extremely very close to each other, in such way that their posterior unity constitutes the modern city of Granada. Existed, for example, in front of Granada, an ancient city, contemporary to Tharsis, called Vera, or Viria, in Indo-European language, according if it is pronounced in Sanskrit or Iranian, and that means demigod, man, hero, man who participates of the divinity, wise warrior, etc. Both cities, one world, by followers of the Pact of Blood, that's to say, Vera, and the other by staunch defenders and propagators of the cultural pact, Granada, they could not live without permanent conflict. Nevertheless, time would show that at least in this case, the god of Granada was stronger than the god of Vera, and Granada ended dominating Vera and the other cities, absorbing them into their walls. The Hebrew took this as an unequivocal sign of their messianic destiny, and would never forget it. Vera must not be confused with Liber, Liberi, or Iliberia, the Illiberate, that the Greek Hekato mentioned, because they were different cities. During the Roman dominion, the cities were still separated, and such situation was maintained even with the Visigothic. The Arabs, in compensation for the provided favors for their invasion, concede to the Hebrews the control of the city of Granada, or Granatha, according to the new denomination. Thence, they would refer to it as the Castle of the Jews. But they even did more. After the destruction of Liberia, they installed their farmstead at the heart of Castalla, Cosala or Gasla, commonly knew as Castilla, other adjacent city, and they favored the economic expansion of Medinat Granata, the mansion of the Jews. That is the end of Elvira, or Elvira, whose inhabitants have to capitulate thousands of years of resistance, and abandon the hill of the same name, and move to Granata. The VILLCA with Medinat Elumbra, and Medinat Castilla, all would end under the control of the Jews of Granada. In the 13th century, when the narrated event occurred, only subsisted the Arab kingdom of Granada, being the city composed by the influential Jewish neighborhood, situated in the primitive location of the castle of Granada, the Arab neighborhood of the Alhambra, the Mozart neighborhood of Castilla, of primal Gallo-Roman root, and the depopulated Elvira. Finally, I will add, that if the Hebrew denominate Raman to the pomegranate, the Arabs narrate as Roman, which explains why for some time the city was called Hinzeri Roman, which means Castle of Granada. But, in one idiom or other it is proven that the meaning of the name not changed in thousands of years. At the light of such missionary activity of the Hebrew priests, who traveled in the navies of Tarsus, must be appreciated the foundation of the temple of Rus Baal, or of the border of Baal. The Phoenicians consecrated every city to Baal, and designated the west with a particular name. So, the Baal of the Sidons was called Baal Sidon, the one of Tyre, Beltus, and the one of the inhabitants of Tarsus, Baal Tars. From the three main aspects of Baal, this is, Baal Chen, the producer, Baal Tammuz, the conservate, and Baal Moloch, the destructor, the Hebrews accepted the last as a personification of each separate, the aspect of Netzah, of Eve, of the armies, who guides to the victory, by the destruction of the enemies of the chosen people or Shekinah. The temple of Rus Baal was dedicated, nonetheless, to the cult of Baal Tammuz or Jehovah Adonai. When the house of Tarsus was in charge of that Iberian seigneury, once free from the Phoenicians after a bloody war, prevented the maintenance of it, with the cult of Baal Tammuz Jehovah, and dedicated the place, in a first moment, to the cult of fire, and in a second cultural instance, to the cult of the cold fire. After the invasion of Hamilcar and the destruction of the Tartessian Empire, the Gauleans established the cult to Baal Moloch in Rus Baal until the Roman conquest. They recognized in Baal Moloch and Jehovah god of Saturn, who denominated Bolger of Saturn to Rus Baal. But Saturn was no other than the Greek god Kronos, or Kronos, who, in the time was active in the Roman pantheon. The priests of Saturn, as will be seen, only replaced the cult of Saturn, for the one of his granddaughter, Proserpina, or Persephone. It is easy to demonstrate it, comparing the Hebrew myth with the Greek, that Jehovah is equivalent to Kronos, and, of course, to Tammuz, to Moloch, and Saturn. To begin, Kronos is son of Uranus, the supreme heaven, as Elohim is of Ahai. And both, Kronos, and Elohim, are gods of the imminent time, of the world, Kronos, or Bereshit. And, the most important, both are enemies, of the Cyclops, it means of the White Atlanteans. In regard to it, it is convenient to remember what the Greek myths tell about Uranus, Kronos, Zeus, Demeter, and Persephone, and clarify such legends by means of the Hyperborean wisdom. Uranus is the supreme heaven, father of the Titans, the Titanes, the Cyclops, and the Hecatoncheires, generations of gods, from whom descend all the other Greek divinities, and the humanity. That's to say that Uranus is another representation of the origin, from which had came to the universe's own creator, Jehovah Satan, and the successive Hyperborean spirits, the first gods, as the traitors, who incarcerated his comrades, to the animal man, as the loyals, or liberators, who seek their orientation and return to the origin. But one of the sons of Uranus, Kronos Jehovah, castrates his father, and declares the war to the Cyclops, to whom he avoided to dwell in their habitual abode, and precipitates in the infernal Tartarus. It means that Kronos Jehovah closes the access to the origin, point of provenance and return of all the uncreated spirits as himself, castrating the generator principle of the gods, preventing his divine birth. Therefore, he is involved in a war with the Cyclops. But who were the Cyclops? The White Atlantans, the weapon constructors of the Atlantis. According to the Greek legends, the Cyclops fabricated the arc and the arrows of Apollo, the Hyperborean, and the ones of his sister Artemis, the bear goddess. Previously, during the War of Kronos Jehovah, they had provided to Zeus with the arms of the thunder, the lightning and the ray; to Poseidon, king of the Atlantis, the arms of the trident; and to Hades, or Vides, the famous helm of invisibility. After the Battle of the Atlantis, and the cataclysm that submerged its continent, the White Atlantans had to march towards the infernal lands, which was only dwelled by the animal men, and the most degraded hybrid races of the earth. Though in the legend represents to the Cyclops, divine constructors, roaming through the infernal regions. And during their transit, for such lands of madness, we have seen, they were closely persecuted by the swarthy Atlantans, the minions of Kronos Jehovah. But Kronos, notwithstanding all his efforts, can't avoid the birth of Zeus, other son of the origin. The image of Zeus has been outrageously degraded by the priests of the cultural pact, but, reviewing the older versions of the myth, it is possible to recognize in him Christus Lucifer, the Lord of Venus, who descended to the Atlantis to bring the Grail that would make possible the orientation and liberation of the incarcerated spirit to the matter, the awakening of the spirit of man. For this reason Zeus is natural ally of the Cyclops, who provide him with the arms with which he beats Kronos Jehovah and secured his power in the Olympic region of the earth, it means, in Katreba, where is initiated the path towards Venus. Zeus Lucifer fights against Kronos Jehovah, in company of Poseidon and Hades, and with the technical support of the Cyclops. Once victorious, in a primitive version of the Battle of the Atlantis, the gods are established in determined parts of the universe. Zeus Lucifer goes to the Olympus, that's to say, to Katreba, but, through its door, its real domicile is constituted in heaven, it means, in Venus. Poseidon in the Atlantis, as king, and also as god of the sea. And Hades goes to Katreba too, but, without returning to Venus, as Zeus Lucifer did, but remaining as lord of the terrestrial abode of the liberator gods to the spirit of man, a place that the priests of the cultural pact, according to what I have exposed, the 10th day, would identify with the infernal Tartarus. Hades is, Vides, the lord of Katreba. With Demeter, a daughter of the origin, Zeus procreates Persephone, that's to say, to Proserpina, the goddess that the Roman priests of Saturn Kronos Jehovah evoked in Rus Baal for her cult, and to whom they dedicated the Carthaginian temple of Baal Moloch, Jehovah. She was a cruel goddess, who dwelled in the infernal Tartarus, with Hades and conciliated perfectly with such remote region of Tartarus, famous for the ancient legend that signalized her as the residence of Medusa. Demeter was the goddess of the wheat, who gave to men for first time such cereal, and lived with Zeus in the Olympus. He had no other sons apart of Persephone, who was raptured by Hades and guided to the Tartarus, to a mansion that required to cross the country of the dead, to reach to her. tells the Greek myth that saddened for her absence, Demeter abandoned the Olympus and descended to the earth to seek her, because she ignored her infernal location. She learns in this manner that Zeus has been accomplice of Hades in the rapture. For 9 nights, Demeter seeks in vain to Persephone, carrying a torch on each hand. Finally, guided by Hecate, the goddess of the sorcery, to whom she found in the crossroads of certain paths, she finds out that Persephone is located in the country of the dead. She goes down there, alone, to warn that the definitive return of her daughter is impossible. Persephone has eaten a grain of pomegranate, and she can't go back to the world of lives anymore, because all who eats food in the country of the dead remains prisoner there forever. In the hells, is precise to make fasting, to avoid the death. At last, Demeter returns to Olympus with Persephone, who, notwithstanding that has to return periodically to hell, to perform the death. The myth of Persephone formed part of the Eleusinian mysteries, where was explained esoterically to the initiates. The attributes of Demeter, by other part, were the spike of wheat and the crane. Until here, the Greek myth. But, what is hidden behind the legend of Demeter, and Persephone or Proserpina? I already explained that Hades is the degraded name of Vides, the lord of Catria, to whom the conspiracy of the cultural pact equated to a god who is lord of the hell or Tartarus. In the same way, the priests, through their Persephone, an ancient white Atlantean goddess, who I am referring to Freya, the wife of Neptune. To discover the real facts behind the story of Persephone, and interpret the cause of the calumny, it is necessary to take present that for the white Atlantans, as for every member of the Hyperborean race, the wife is also the sister, identity which goes further than a simple symbolic association, and refers to the mystery of the original couple, of the uncreated spirits. Freya, a part of being his wife, is sister of Neptune, to whom the Greek priests of the cultural pact equated to Demeter, the goddess who gave to men, for first time, the plant of the wheat, the keeper of the seed. Thenceforth it is said, that never to a son of Demeter, to whom she would have conceived being virgin in Venus, that to say, in the Olympus, as I already related, the 12th day. Her spiritual son, Neptune, who auto-crucified himself in the tree of the terror, the pomegranate of life, to discover the secret of the death, and would be his wife Freya, who would resuscitate him, revealing with her dance the secret of the life and death. For this reason, the legends only mention Freya Persephone, whose name was very ingrained amongst the populations of the Pact of Blood, and they cast the veil of taboo over the feet of Neptune. The swarthy Atlantans, and the priests of the cultural pact, wanted to hide by every means, the posterior legacy that the resurrected Great White Chief made, unto men, that is to say, the mystery of the labyrinth. Was Neptune, in fact, the real inspirer of the mystery of the labyrinth, in whose course was administered to the Hyperborean initiates a sign called T-robing Widnada, formed with uncreated runes. Such sign permitted to the incarcerated spirit to wake up and orientate towards the origin, finding the exit of the labyrinth of the illusion in which was strayed. Nevertheless, as in the case of the feet of Neptune, the exit could be never found by the hero, with absence of his original couple. In other way he can die, spiritually, after the 9 nights hanging from the tree of terror. Thereby, in the cultural humbug of the priests wanted Demeter to search for Freya Persephone for 9 nights. Who guides her, finally, is Hecate, with whom she coincided in a crossroad of paths, it means, in the interior of a labyrinth. Hecate is then a general representation of what Freya would be individually for Neptune, the original couple. For the ancient Greeks, in all the crossroads of paths was Hecate, pleased to orientate the lost journeyman towards his better destiny, symbol that, as it is seen, came from far away. Notwithstanding this wonderful goddess, to whom Tricephalus statues were erected, that indicated the triple nature of the white man, physical, soul, and uncreated spirit, she was finally converted in the goddess of the sorcery, and which, consequence, of course, of the cultural pact. Naturally, the rapture of Friar Persephone is a spiritual rapture realized by herself to resuscitate her husband. It means, in the impulse of a sacred ecstasy. Zeus Lucifer, allegedly the father of the Neptune, and Hades Vides, the lord of Cataba, are the sages of the age, to whom she asks about the manner to save his husband. And the counsel that she received from them was what made her decide to go down the hell of illusion, the homeland of the spiritually dead. It means, to the earth, the world of the asleep men. And, it is known, that who eats from the illusion, who let enter inside of himself the great deceit of the one, remains chained forever, in the matter, unable to return to the origin, lost in the enchanted labyrinth of the warm life. However, Freya had not tasted the forbidden fruit, was free to go back, if she wanted, to the origin. Keeper of the secret of the death was her decision to resuscitate Neptune, revealing by means of the dance, the knowledge of the Kalakikaki. But, for it, she had to believe in the death. She had to eat a grain of the pomegranate, and become a partridge. She had to transcend the mask of the death, and reach to the end of Neptune's being. And Neptune, when he saw the death head-on, he awakened, and understood the death, resurrecting then, and revealing to the asleep man, the secret of the labyrinth. But in this legacy, Neptune compromised his divine wife, who agreed to remain periodically in the infernal Tartarus, that's to say, in the world of the asleep men, and to show herself before them with the image of the death, to make them transcend in the mystery of the cold fire, and resuscitate, also, as man of stone, as Hyperborean initiates, as wise warriors. A palette reflect of this part of the story is conserved in the legend of the young Predix, sister, therefore, wife, of Daedalus, the inventor of the labyrinth. It means, of Neptune. When Predix was falling into an abyss, the goddess of the wisdom, Athene, felt mercy for her, and she converted her in partridge, from where emerged the Greek belief that the partridge's dance resolved the enigma of the labyrinth, and which gave place to a college of priestesses, bent on reproduce such dance. I already explained that Kronos Saturn Jehovah closes the access to the origin, point of provenance and return of all the uncuttered spirits, that's to say, he cuts off the path towards the exit of the labyrinth. In the Cretan myth, the inventor of the mystery of the labyrinth is Daedalus Neptune, and who cuts off the path to the exit is the Minotaur, a half-human, half-bull being. But, the god who also had the feet of a bull, was Dionysius, defect that obeyed him to wear boots, or buskings. And Dionysius, the god of wine, was classically assimilated to Jehovah, by the ancient Hebrews, who saw in both of them to the god of the barley. In this manner is closed a circle traced by the priests of the cultural pact in which it collected, in different ages and places, the representations of Kronos, Saturn, Jehovah, Dionysius Sabdacia, and the Minotaur, or guardian of the exit. Finally, I will tell that in times of the prophet Amos, 8th century before Christ, the identity of Jehovah and Saturn was established, and accepted by the priests. But ye have borne the sanctuary to Sikkoth, Saturn, the idol of your God. Therefore I will deport you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, a thief, whose name is Adonis Ebrat. Amos 5:26. But the situation didn't change after the captivity, because in the age of the prophet Ezekiel, 6th century before Christ, was worshipped interchangeably as Jehovah, or Tammuz Adonis, that's to say, to Adonai. Then, he brought me to the door of the temple of Eve, which was towards the north, and I saw there sat women, weeping for the death of Adonis. Raymond Tammuz. Ezekiel 8:14.